There's a kind of beauty that doesn't scream. It doesn't need to be announced. It enters the room like a quiet knowing, a presence that speaks even in silence. This is the kind of beauty that lives in a woman who has stopped chasing, who no longer asks for permission to exist. Irresistibility is not about being the loudest voice or the brightest smile. It's not a game of who gets chosen first. It's an energy, a quiet, magnetic current that flows from a woman who has come home to herself. So many women, especially after years of being overlooked or misunderstood, carry this silent weight, the idea that they need to compensate for their age, for their scars, for the softness they were told was weakness. They try to become smaller, quieter, more pleasing, as if their truth needed to be edited to deserve love. But what if the very things you were told to hide are actually what make you unforgettable? Louise Hay once said, "When I accept myself as I am, I blossom." And this is not just a comforting phrase. It's a shift, a return, a moment where the war with the mirror ends, and you begin to see yourself not through the eyes of someone else, but through the lens of reverence. There is a woman, within every woman, who no longer performs, who no longer explains, who no longer waits. She moves with intention. She breathes with presence. She becomes magnetic not by effort, but by essence. Clarissa Pinkola Estes calls this the wild woman, the one who remembers, the one who listens to the moon more than the crowd, the one who doesn't rush to be understood, because she has already understood a deeper truth. She is enough, as she is, and maybe, just maybe, the most irresistible version of you isn't the one you've been trying to become. Maybe it's the one you've been quietly hiding, the one you lost while trying to be chosen, the one who used to dance without asking if it was too much, the one who used to speak before she doubted every word, the one who could feel without shame. In this video, we'll walk together through the deeper habits, emotional and spiritual, that awaken this woman again. Not the habits that make you look a certain way, but the ones that make you feel like you've finally come home, because you were never too much. You were just with people who couldn't hold your depth. And now, it's time to remember. You are not here to beg for crumbs of love. You are here to become the kind of woman who feeds herself so deeply that anyone who comes close must rise to meet her. Let's begin. There's a silence that feels like punishment, the kind that leaves you wondering what you did wrong, where you lost your place in someone else's story. But there's another kind of silence, one that feels like sanctuary. A pause not because of absence, but because of fullness. A quiet that says, "I am enough here, even when I say nothing." A mature woman who has walked through heartbreak, through loneliness, through the aching noise of unmet expectations. She learns to honor this second kind of silence. She no longer fills the empty spaces with explanations. She no longer rushes to respond, to reassure, to keep the connection alive at any cost, because she knows real connection never demands urgency. It invites presence, and presence doesn't live in chaos. It lives in breath, in the spaces between words, in the quiet confidence of knowing your worth isn't measured by how quickly you reply or how often you're available. She used to apologize for taking time to herself, for needing solitude, for not being on all the time, but not anymore. Now she understands that her silence is not rejection, it's restoration. It's the sacred space where she hears herself again. It's where she reclaims her energy from the noise of the world and brings it back home to her own heart. When a woman stops apologizing for her silence, something shifts in the room. People begin to notice that her attention is a gift, not a given, that her presence is earned, not assumed, and that the quiet she carries is not emptiness, but power. And maybe that's why silence, in the right hands, becomes unforgettable. Because in a world that's constantly screaming, a woman who's at peace in her stillness is magnetic. Stillness does not mean absence. It means depth. It means discernment. It means she's not chasing noise anymore. She's listening for truth. And the ones who truly see her will wait, will soften, will show up not with urgency, but with respect. Because the woman who honors her silence teaches others to do the same. There was a time when being left unseen could unravel her entire day, when the silence from someone she longed for felt like a punishment, like her heart was being slowly erased. She knew too well the pain of offering everything, only to receive crumbs in return, waiting by the phone, replaying words, questioning her own worth through the lens of someone else's indifference. But that season has passed, not because it didn't hurt, but because she finally chose something deeper, herself. Now she pours her energy not into chasing what pulls away, but into rituals that bring her home. She lights a candle not to set the mood for someone else, but to honor the space she's created within. She writes in her journal not hoping someone will understand, but because she understands herself. She dances in her living room, barefoot and unobserved, because her body still remembers joy, even when no one's watching. This kind of devotion, it's quiet, sacred, and fierce. When a woman stops feeding her rejection and starts nourishing her spirit, everything begins to shift. Her energy, once tangled in trying to prove her worth, becomes whole again. Her mornings are no longer filled with anxiety about who might text, but with gratitude for her own breath, her own rhythm, her own heartbeat. She knows now that love doesn't grow in the soil of desperation. It grows where there is presence, and presence begins with ritual. When she waters her own roots, she stops depending on someone else's rain, and in that grounded stillness, she becomes magnetic, not because she's trying to be seen, but because she's finally seeing herself. And the world, it notices. Even if no one says a word, the shift is felt, because a woman who nourishes her rituals glows differently. She doesn't ask for love to complete her. She brings love into the room, simply by being fully there. There's a moment, quiet, and almost imperceptible, when a woman stops trying to rewind time. When she no longer stares at the mirror searching for the girl she once was, but begins to see the depth of the woman she has become. That moment is liberation. For too long, the world told her to be less visible, less emotional, less aged, as if her lines made her less lovable, as if her softness was a weakness. But she's come to understand that every year etched onto her skin is a line of poetry, a verse from the life she has survived and sacredly lived. Louise Hay once said, "I grow more beautiful and wise every day." And she feels that now, not as a quote on a page, but as a quiet truth rising in her bones. She no longer compares herself to younger versions of herself, or to the women on screens curated to look effortless. She walks into a room with the kind of elegance that cannot be manufactured, the kind of confidence that doesn't ask for attention. It commands respect. And perhaps that's the deepest kind of beauty, the one that says, "I've lived, I've lost, I've learned, and I'm still here, more myself than ever." She wears her age like a crown, not because she wants applause, but because she's done shrinking. She's done apologizing for growing wiser, for needing fewer words, for recognizing red flags in seconds. Her age has become her compass. It tells her who she is, and who she'll never be again. And if someone overlooks her because of her age, that's not her loss. It's theirs, because she no longer needs to be the youngest in the room to feel radiant. She just needs to be real, and that she has mastered. When she made peace with her age, she stopped chasing youth and started embodying power. There was a time when she filled the silence just to feel safe, when she talked fast, explained too much, softened her truth so they would be easier to swallow. Words were a way to prove worth, to earn space, to keep someone close, but not anymore. Now she speaks like a woman who knows the weight of language, not just its sound, but its soul. Every word she releases carries presence. Even a simple "good morning" from her lingers, not because of the words themselves, but because of the energy behind them. She speaks slowly, but with depth, with pause, with truth. There's a difference between speaking to be heard and speaking to be felt. She has learned the difference. She doesn't say yes when she means maybe. She doesn't say "I'm fine" when something inside her is breaking. And when she does choose silence, it's not avoidance, it's alignment. Because she knows that not every thought deserves a voice, and not every moment requires a response. She speaks to connect, not to convince. There's a kind of sensuality in her voice now, not the kind that seeks validation, but the kind that comes from knowing who she is. Her words are measured like a sacred offering. She doesn't waste them. She doesn't weaponize them. She lets them land softly or fiercely, depending on the truth they carry. Like her lovers, she chooses her words with care, with intention, with presence. She's not afraid of being misunderstood. She's afraid of betraying her own truth just to be accepted. And so, when she speaks, people listen, not just with their ears, but with their hearts. Because a woman who speaks from her soul awakens something in others. She no longer uses language to fill space. She uses it to create it, for honesty, for clarity, for depth. And in a world full of noise, her voice becomes a sanctuary, There comes a point in a woman's life when she realizes that her time is not just minutes on a clock. It's her energy, her presence, her spirit being spent. And once she understands this, she no longer gives it away to those who treat it as casual, or worse, conditional. She used to wait. Wait for the call. Wait for someone to be ready. Wait for the plans to include her. She said yes when she meant no. She rearranged her days, her dreams, her quiet needs, just to make someone else feel more comfortable. But slowly, beautifully, she stopped. Now she treats her time like a sacred offering. Not everyone has access. Not every invitation is a door she'll walk through. Not every conversation deserves her attention, because she knows now, what she gives her time to, she gives her life to. When someone asks to see her, she doesn't ask, "Will he like me?" She asks, "How do I feel after being with him?" And if the answer is anything less than peaceful, she knows that is not her place to stay. She no longer fills her calendar to avoid her own loneliness. She fills her days with what nourishes her soul, with walks that clear her mind, with books that stir her heart, with friendships that feel like home. Her solitude has become sacred, not a punishment, but a practice, a return. And when someone steps into her world now, they feel it. They feel the weight of her presence, the quiet strength of a woman who no longer overextends herself just to feel needed. She doesn't play the supporting role in someone else's chaos. She protects her peace as if it were breath itself. Because she's learned, when you stop giving your time to those who drain you, you make room for those who honor you. And that is not cold, that is holy. Sensuality, for her, is no longer a performance. It's not about being watched. It's not something she puts on to be desired. It's something she lives. It moves through her like breath, like water, like music no one else hears but she still dances to. There's a softness in the way she runs her fingers through her hair, a quiet confidence in how she takes a deep breath before speaking, a grounded calm in the way she holds eye contact, not to seduce, but to connect. She doesn't need approval to feel alive. Her sensuality isn't on display. It's embodied. She used to wonder if she was enough. If her body was too soft, her voice too low, her style too simple. But over time, she realized, the most magnetic women are not the loudest. They are the most rooted, the most present, the most at home in their own skin. Now she walks into a room not wondering who will notice her, but noticing how she feels in the room. She dresses not for validation, but for expression. She laughs not to be liked, but because something inside her feels light. Her sensuality is not an act. It's an offering, a reflection of how deeply she's learned to enjoy her own company. She doesn't chase attention because she no longer feeds on it. She's nourished by something deeper, self-respect, inner peace, the slow burn of self-love that glows quietly, yet unmistakably. And perhaps that's what makes her irresistible. She's not performing. She's not adjusting. She's not trying to be seen. She already sees herself, fully, kindly, passionately. And in a world obsessed with appearance, a woman who lives her sensuality from the inside out becomes unforgettable. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from always needing to prove you're worthy. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It hides behind perfect responses, over-explaining, trying to be chosen, trying to be enough. But one day, a woman wakes up and realizes she's tired, not just physically, but soul-deep tired. And in that sacred fatigue, she finds something powerful, the decision to stop. She stops proving. She stops convincing. She stops molding herself to be more desirable, more agreeable, more convenient. And something incredible happens. Her energy returns. Her breath deepens. Her body softens. Her heart, for the first time in a long time, exhales. She no longer fights for spaces that feel tight around her spirit. She no longer negotiates her worth in the marketplace of half-hearted love. She's not angry. She's not bitter. She's just done. Done begging to be enough for someone who never learned to recognize value beyond performance. Now, she invests her attention in her own garden. She feeds her joy, tends to her creativity, listens to her longings. She returns to the parts of herself she abandoned while waiting to be loved right. She becomes so full of herself, not in arrogance, but in truth, that she no longer seeks outside approval to feel alive. And yes, some people will be confused. They were used to the woman who gave too much, waited too long, apologized too often, But she's not that woman anymore. She has learned that the deepest form of love isn't about proving. It's about being. Being true, being grounded, being whole. And in that being, she becomes unforgettable. Because when a woman stops trying to prove she's enough, she starts becoming everything she was meant to be. She no longer plays the role of the fixer, the one who bends, molds, and sacrifices to maintain love. That chapter is closed, because now she has become something far more powerful. A mirror. Not a mirror that flatters, not one that distorts, but one that reflects, with clarity, with grace, with emotional honesty. When a man stands in her presence, he sees himself more clearly, not because she says much, but because her energy reveals what words cannot. She doesn't try to change him. She doesn't beg him to grow. She simply holds her own truth with such quiet confidence that he must confront his own. She becomes a kind of emotional compass, not by effort, but by embodiment. There is something about a woman who knows who she is, who no longer reacts to games, who no longer collapses into someone else's chaos. She listens, but she doesn't absorb. She observes, but she doesn't chase. And in that space of unwavering presence, the truth begins to surface. Some men rise in that reflection. They become better, deeper, more present. Others run, not because she's too much, but because they're not ready to meet their own shadows. But she doesn't take it personally. Not anymore. She understands now. Her power was never in convincing someone to stay. Her power is in being so anchored in her own emotional clarity that she becomes a mirror for others to see what they have yet to face. And that is rare. That is sacred. Because when a woman stops living in reaction and begins living in alignment, she stops manipulating and starts magnetizing, and the right man won't be intimidated by her truth. He will be inspired by it. There's a kind of fullness that doesn't need to be filled, a peace that doesn't beg for company, a beauty that isn't loud, but lingers, like a familiar scent, like a song you can't forget. That is the beauty of a woman who has returned to herself. Louise Hay said, "I am deeply fulfilled with who I am." And when a woman finally feels those words not as a mantra, but as a lived reality, something shifts. She no longer waits for someone else to recognize her worth. She lives it. She breathes it. She becomes it. This woman no longer asks, "Am I enough?" She knows she is, because the love she once begged for, she now gives to herself, in silence, in ritual, in presence, in truth. The most irresistible thing about her is not her look, or her style, or her charm. It's her peace. It's the way she's rooted, even in the storm. The way she loves without losing herself. The way she stays whole, even when the world tries to pull her into pieces. Clarissa Pinkola Estes reminds us, the woman who reconnects with her wild, intuitive nature no longer begs for scraps of affection. She chooses. She discerns. She lives with a sacred yes to herself. So if you've been asking what makes a woman truly magnetic, this is it. Not the chase, not the costume, but the quiet courage to live as you are, fully and without apology. Maybe the most irresistible habit of all is loving yourself so completely that no one can offer you less than what you've already created within. And before this video ends, I want you to imagine a simple scene. A woman wakes up. The light is soft. The world hasn't rushed in yet. She walks to the mirror, looks at herself. Not to fix, not to critique, but to meet herself. And she smiles. She lifts her hand, gently touches her face, and without speaking a word, something within her whispers, "I see you. You are already enough." That woman, no one forgets. If this video touched something tender in you, I invite you to stay close to this space. Subscribe, share your voice, let yourself be part of this journey. And if your heart is asking for more, click on the video on the screen now. It's waiting to walk with you, deeper into the woman you're becoming.